those who are tuning in around the world to the best in late-night conservative talk, Hackheads Radio. The best late-night conservative talk show in America. In America.
And in this web was a large, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest spider I've ever seen.
And welcome to the Sackheads Radio Show. I am Sackhead Clint, your host. What a week. Sackhead Sean will be with us soon. Sackhead Soko is at the boards tonight. How are you, Soko? Soko can't talk because he has no microphone tonight. It's been a busy news week, and we have a lot to talk about this evening, so thank you for joining us. I think on the line we have Sackhead Sean.
Yeah. Hey, buddy. Say, hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy, stop snapping your fingers at us.
Sean doesn't know what he's doing. I'll have to take over.
Soko just said he might have to take over for this segment. Are you going to bring our man in or what?
He's in. He just doesn't know how to work the computer.
Even when he's not here, it's great. We can still pick on him. And what's even better is Soko's out of the cage tonight. So we have Sean in the cage. So people don't know the story about what happened this week. But there was some issues. And Sackhead Sean was naughty, for lack of a better term. And so we actually voted as a board and allowed Soko out of the cage, and we actually have Sean in the cage for this week. So we don't know if he's going to get out of the cage or not. I don't know if our friend Ken is going to start a Save Ken or a Save Sean campaign. My guess is probably not. And if Soko can't figure this out, I think Soko and Sean are going to be in the cage jointly together.
Why am I going to be in the cage?
And that could be awkward. Not for me, but for them. Well, maybe for Soko. But not so much for Sean. So this week, I want to get to a story that had me concerned. And we've talked about it a little bit before on this show. And this is the announcement by President Obama around the 18th, announcing his restrictions on distributing military-style or military surplus equipment to America's law enforcement agencies. And this push, this public push, and the White House and so forth came about after the Ferguson riots. Really kind of brought everything to a head when law enforcement was out there with armored vehicles and so forth. And the concern was that the law enforcement officers look mean like an occupying force with their military-style equipment. And we've touched on it before on this show about the importance of having certain equipment, not only from a public safety standpoint, which is probably the most important reason, but also from a fiscal standpoint. And I understand that there are people on both sides of the aisle that feel that this type of equipment for law enforcement is not appropriate, but I think it is. And Sean and I have had this discussion several times. Again, we've talked about it on the show before, and I want to get a little bit into it here tonight and try and make the case for this program. So law enforcement agencies, through this military surplus program, used to be able to get surplus items from the federal government. And it's items that a lot of the agencies would have had to purchase otherwise. And again, now you're talking about increasing budgets, particularly in times where agencies were feeling a fiscal crunch. And some of the equipment included firearms, weapons, AR-15 style rifles, and so forth. And I don't know how many people in the country remember the West Hollywood shootout here in California. And if anybody has seen the movie Heat, it was a lot like that. Basically, two individuals robbed a bank. They came out. They were armed with automatic weapons. They had body armor and so forth. And they engaged in a through the streets of West Hollywood. And it was, if you've seen the movie Heat and know the bank scene I'm talking about, it was like that. Law enforcement was severely undergunned to match the bad guys in this case, to the point where they actually had to go to gun stores for additional ammunition, for better weapons, because they were shooting back and fighting essentially with pistols and shotguns against two individuals armed with rifles. So what changed as a result of this incident was law enforcement began putting rifles in their vehicles so that they had the firepower to be able to respond. This shooting took place February 28th, 1997. Bank of America was the bank that was robbed. Two of the suspects, I think it was Larry Eugene Phillips and Emil, I can't pronounce his last name, doesn't matter. But they walked into the bank, robbed the Bank of America branch, and when they exit and attempted to flee the scene, they began engaging the law enforcement officers. Law enforcement officers at the time, they were armed with 9mm. Most of them had 9mm handguns. Again, in addition to their 12-gauge shotguns. And law enforcement, again, was just severely outgunned in this event. Ultimately, both of these individuals committed suicide, I believe. So this is when law enforcement begins putting rifles in vehicles to better protect the public. They could have ended this situation a lot sooner had they had the proper equipment to do so, and less civilian lives would have been put at risk as a result. You would have had two suspects who could have been put down quicker, less rounds being exchanged between, which would have reduced the amount of exposure from innocent people in the area. And so law enforcement made that shift. And look, purchasing weapons, particularly for larger agencies, such as Los Angeles Police Department, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, the California Highway Patrol, the various agencies that responded to this, can be very, very expensive. I mean, you're looking at an agency with, like, for example, the California Highway Patrol, about 7,000 officers. Their vehicles is a pretty good hit on the budget.
What do you think he's actually like? Do you ever think Obama just says or speaks on these small issues, or not even issues? He makes things into issues to make himself look good to the public. You know,
I think he's pandering kind of to his liberal base. The liberals don't like a militarized law enforcement force, and that's really not what they're after. I think that they need to have.
Sean says he agrees. You hear him?
Oh, we can hear him now.
Yeah,
Sean, welcome to the party.
Hi, buddy.
Hey, friend.
He's
how
been
are
here
you?
For a while. He just hasn't said anything. I scared him away.
Do you know what Soko is? Because I can't get anything to work in the studio.
I don't know. Yeah, Sako's here with me, and we already told the public that you were in a cage tonight because of how you behaved earlier this week.
That wasn't my fault.
The fact of the matter is, for the first time in Sackhead history, Soko was voted out of the cage and you were voted in. I mean, there's just no way around that.
I mean, I'm even sitting in his seat.
Yeah, Soko is even in your seat right now.
Wow, how quickly I'm replaced.
Oh, yeah, very, very quickly.
No, but seriously, do you ever think,
have a crisis, you use whatever agenda you want to push and use that crisis as an excuse to further your agenda and garner public support. That's exactly.
But what's the intent behind it? I'm just trying to figure that out as
the complete disarmament of police.
Yeah.
Public appeasement, trying to make everyone feel that and here's the best part. He's doing this based on the riots in Ferguson. Meanwhile, the police didn't cause the riots in Ferguson. They were forced to respond by a riotous mob.
Right. And so he takes this program away, and again, I kind of want to get back to some of the history about some of this, and we're just talking about the rifles right now, and that's one incident that happened in California in 1997 that kind of began the whole, hey, our law enforcement needs rifles, and now we fast forward, and again, we're talking about these rifles and even getting military surplus rifles and whatnot. Let's look at the terror threat. And, Sean, I know the Boston Marathon bombing is close to your heart because of your ties to the city and so forth. But the apprehension phase of that, with the two brothers engaging law enforcement like they did, law enforcement needed that type of weapon to stop that terrorist threat. You look at the terror attack in France and how those terrorists, those two individuals, they engaged law enforcement as law enforcement rolled up on scene, and they were using coordinated small unit tactics while they were moving. Law enforcement today not only has to deal with the rapist or the robber or the drug dealer, they also have to deal with the terrorist. And on a side note, look at the shootout, look at the big melee that just happened in Waco, Texas between all of the 1% or the outlaw biker gangs.
All the thugs.
And law enforcement, again, that is a situation where you have that many violent criminals in one location with law enforcement. They need the weapons in order to keep that under wraps and protect the public safety. But back to the terrorism incident. If Obama, he stops this program, and now agencies are potentially unable to get replacement rifles. As rifles wear out, parts wear out, they're already surplus weapons and so forth, and they cannot replace them, or newer agencies or agencies that were in this program are now unable to get this stuff. They may or may not have the budget to get what they need. Let's say they don't have the budget because they're a smaller agency, or they have to lay off one or two officers for salary purposes to then have the budget to purchase the tools they need.
So he's not saying that they can't have them. He's just saying, I'm not going to fund it.
He's saying they're not going to be the surplus equipment is not going to be available to them anymore. And we're just talking weapons right now. That's not even the biggest issue, I don't believe, in this. I think the biggest issue in this is armored vehicles. And he used that as a big excuse. Armored tracked vehicles. These surplus vehicles coming from the military to law enforcement agencies, they're not tanks. These vehicles don't have a big turret on them with a large gun protruding. They don't come mounted with a 50 caliber or with twin 30s. They don't come with any of that. They are an armored vehicle, absolutely. They are capable of going a lot of different places by the nature of the vehicle. But it's armor. Armor by its very nature is defensive. Law enforcement's not getting tanks to come out to set in crowd situations. They're not getting these vehicles and mounting large caliber guns on the top in order to terrorize a civilian population.
When are they using them?
So they're using.
I've never seen them just for fun, right?
No, never seen them just for fun.
Right.
They don't.
They're not just out there.
You know who uses their big? You know who uses their big vehicles for fun and to go to Costco and to grocery stores? The fire guys.
The fire department. Yes.
Okay.
I've seen them all.
the fire guys. If they're not rescuing cats out of trees or cooking tri-tip, they're going to the store in their rigs and buying tri-tip, right? And I love them. I do. I love them to death. But it's
only on Tuesdays.
It's only on Tuesdays, and this is Wednesday. So thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, it's not like law enforcement's driving up to the local coffee shop, right, and just kind of parking it out the school and just hanging out. They're using these in crisis situations. And again, armor is defensive. And you look at Ferguson, where they're taking rocks and bottles, potentially could get shot at. Having a big armored vehicle to move officers behind and to maneuver them into different locations can be huge. And as a medical evac. For example, if there is a major attack. Let's say there's another attack like there was in France where you have a terror organization. Or you have terrorists like the Boston Marathon bombers happened here in the United States, where those rounds are being exchanged. The public is obviously at risk. How do you get either injured citizens or injured law enforcement members out under fire? You're going to take that armored vehicle in that is capable of absorbing those rounds, those hits, because it's defensive in nature, and you now have a mobile ambulance, which is what those things can double as. So by prohibiting... Yeah.
If they hit... You got to pitch it to terrorists. Well, look at the soft targets in this country and what they go after when they look for targets of opportunity. You look at places like malls... You look at places like sporting arenas, something like that. If they set up and they get 4 or 5 guys in a barricaded situation, and ask anyone that's ever been on a battlefield, I haven't, but they will wait for somebody to get injured and use that as a sniper opportunity. As people are going in to try to evac that person without protection, they will pick them apart.
Absolutely. And so this is, again, where this armor comes into play. And if you take that capability out of law enforcement's hands, and so that's the argument for the liberals out there, okay? You take law enforcement's ability away, a defensive tool in the armor, because it looks scary and you don't like the way it looks. Yeah. And you now, your jurisdiction now loses the capability to conduct medical evac under fire for citizens that may be injured or law enforcement professionals that may be injured, and you lose the ability to maneuver law enforcement into a position where they can take action to stop that threat, where otherwise they may be getting chewed up while they're maneuvering into position in their regular patrol cars. So now for the conservatives out here, if that capability is not at the local level, if local law enforcement does not have the capability to maintain that equipment under local control, who do you have to call? You have to call the federal government. Or you have to call the National Guard if they have that type of equipment, which is, in fact, a military force. And how long is their response going to be to get there? Where is the nearest armory that has that equipment to whatever location this situation is evolving and happening in? And how do you muster those National Guards folks or those troops to be able to go to that particular site? Yeah. And their rules of engagement are completely different. They're not in a law enforcement role. And can the military take action because Posse Comitatus Act prohibits them from engaging in law enforcement services, prohibits them from engaging in law enforcement missions in times of peace here on U.S. soil. So how can you have the military come in with their armor and take action? You can't. It's illegal. So that's the danger. So for the conservative folks out there, if this is not available to your local law enforcement, you now have to rely on the federal government. And so you asked what's Obama's motivation? I think that's his motivation. I think Obama is very pro-federal police force. I think he is. What's that, Sean?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So you brought up Posse Comitatus. That almost immediately eliminates the military because it's essentially a time of peace. So what's going to be the response? Well, the response is, well, we should move federal assets with this equipment into the area and have them in each and every district more so, and they'll be the response team. Well, since they're already there, why don't we just have them help out and do some patrol on the streets, and we'll have DHS or whoever start doing some patrols and just help out. If we deputize them locally, then, it's a progression. And what it does is it invites the federal policing into a local level, unlike now where it's usually done on a partnership for good or bad, but it's usually done in a partnership with DEA and ATF working with local cops and marshals, etc. It will now be they will operate almost autonomously away from it and kind of ease themselves into active policing in local communities.
I think you guys are thinking too far ahead. They would never bring the feds. I mean, that's a lot of money for them to spend.
They would absolutely bring the feds, Soko.
No.
They would absolutely bring the feds.
They'll just pull the federal money they put now into local law enforcement and say, well, you guys don't need as many cops because we have the federal agents helping you with the federal officers.
That's the purpose of just getting rid of the armored tanks anyways. You just have another force that has this instead
of
the police
but you have another force that's maintained at the federal level.
Right.
You got You got, but here's the thing:
it doesn't make sense in the end,
it
logically.
it does make sense from this
total
instance.
sense because the people on the left believe the federal government is the answer for everything, and that they can do no wrong.
Yep, and they want to control this. This is why they want this federal review of all law enforcement use of force. This is why you have Department of Homeland Security now with uniformed officers in patrol cars, with their mission being all modes of transportation, riding trains and Viper teams and engaged in patrol activities here on our streets. They like that federal control. You got to understand, the liberal left and the progressives do not like the 10th Amendment. They don't like states' rights. They like big federal government, big federal control. And how do you do that? You do that by taking away programs like this, by encroaching into areas that are usually reserved for state governments or local governments, like education and so forth, so that you can take that over and essentially move in to take over that realm or that world. So by limiting law enforcement's ability to respond to these types of events, you now have to, their argument, have a federal force capable of responding to these events. That's the end game, Soko. They want big federal control. They don't like the whole 10th Amendment states' rights thing. States can do basically what they want if it's not prohibited to them in the Constitution. Something interesting while I was prepping for this segment, I actually looked up just so I had the verbiage of the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 in front of me. But the United States Army Combined Arms Center was a hit on the search engine I used that actually had the Posse Comitatus Act on their webpage. And when I went to click on the URL was not there anymore.
I'm surprised you used that big acronym there, URL. I'm glad you know it.
Do you like that? No, I don't know what it means. I just read it off the screen where it says the requested URL was not found. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what a server is, and I don't know what a URL is, but it sounded awesome. So I figured you guys would be proud of me. But I thought that was interesting. I mean, this is the United States Army Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and they took down the Posse Comitatus Act for some reason.
Yeah, that's weird. You would think that would be something they want people to not know. Oh, right.
Oh.
Right. If it's not there, then people don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things, Clint, we talked about this before, and we'll talk about it again, but the radical left and the far left, the believers, not even the leaders, obviously we know where the leaders want to go, but the true believers in those groups are pushing for feds to control everything because they think at that point, because they have a guy, especially right now, they have a guy in the White House who's appeasing everything they complain about.
Yep.
They think that it will change. It will change, but not for the better. They don't realize that the problems in these communities that lead up to these issues that we're seeing now, I mean, like I said earlier, the reason all this is on the table now is because of Ferguson. Well, who caused Ferguson? Well, it was the police. No, it wasn't. It was 40 years of horrible local and state government and federal decisions that have been causing these areas to deteriorate. There's a reason why Detroit, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Ferguson to a point, have ridiculously high crime rates. It has nothing to do with the police enforcing or not enforcing the crime or how they do it. It has to do with there are people there who are committing crimes regularly. And why is that? Well, the economy is horrible. Why is the economy horrible? Democratic rule. Mm-hmm. There's nothing for kids to do. Why? Because the economy is horrible. Democratic rule. You know, when Lyndon Johnson took out fathers out of a lot of homes with the then they've been doing appeasement after appeasement after appeasement on a federal, state, and local level, and this is what happens. And it was like that into New York until Giuliani came in and said, no, we're not having crime here anymore. Things are going to be different. We're going to enforce the law. People are going to abide by the rules. We're going to clean up Times Square. We're going to put a cop on every corner. And you look at, it's going the other way now, but you look at what Giuliani did with New York, and that should be the example.
It should be, but it's not. Or it's not now because it doesn't meet their agenda. But I want with this segment I wanted to, and I know we're running out of time on this segment. We're already a little bit over on our breaks. But
what else?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go for the full hour.
but I wanted to bring the attention to folks on both sides of the aisle that have called for this, the dangers, the slippery slope that they're kind of going down, and some of the unintended consequences, if you will, of this. And I had a discussion with somebody this past week about this, about hey, and they said, well, what if the military just brings the equipment in? Well, here's the problem: if it's owned by the military, and let's say you even have a military driver, because that's who they're trained to do, it's a violation of that Posse Comitatus Act. You can't a law enforcement agency can't even use military investigators for information in certain cases or whatnot, because
That's
you're
not
using
true.
because
CIS do it all the time.
oh yeah, that's right. You see it on TV because you're using a military asset in order to enforce civilian law.
Well, and Clint, you know what? If that becomes the burden that gets in the way of them as they're trying to further this federal expansion of policing, then we'll just get rid of Posse Comitatus, and then that's not an issue anymore.
That has to go through Congress. I mean, this was an 1878 act.
I mean, does this guy ever really go through Congress? I mean, he may go through Congress to go have a cigarette out back, but I mean, it's not like this president's a big fan of letting Congress do stuff.
Right. No, I get it, but the fact is, I mean, he could just do it and then be sued later, and that's what's scary. But this program specifically is very problematic for the federal government to stop. And I'm not talking about just a budgetary standpoint, but from a public safety standpoint and from a potential standpoint of allowing tyranny to kind of seep in the back door, if you will. And when I talked about military investigators, there is case law out there that talks about the Posse Comitatus Act being violated when civilian law enforcement officials make direct active use of military investigators, because that is deemed a military asset being used for civilian law enforcement purposes. So if you can't use a military investigator in a crime as a law enforcement officer, do you really think you're going to be able to use an armored vehicle in the middle of a firefight with active terrorist shooting or even an active shooter event and lives are in danger?
Yeah, good luck trying to get it there in time.
Yeah, exactly. And,
prime example, Garland.
Go ahead.
And I want to talk about Garland really quick before we wrap up at the bottom of the hour here. But Garland, in a way, we got lucky. Not the cop didn't get lucky. He was obviously very well trained and did what he was supposed to do. But reality is we got lucky that you had the cop at the right place at the right time. If you remove all of the SWAT protection that was inside that building, and you play variables. You remove the SWAT guys. Okay, the local department didn't have a SWAT team or couldn't afford a SWAT team or didn't have the protection or whatever to protect that event. And now all of a sudden, the cop gets out of the car and starts engaging these two guys, and he's shot dead, God forbid, and they make their way into the event. Garland is an entirely different story now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you talk about, listen, this guy put him down with two pistols. Yeah, that's great, but that's not the norm in this situation. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. That is not the norm. This guy was either exceptionally lucky or exceptionally good or a combination of both. But when you're anyone up against a rifle, the last thing you want is a pistol. And these guys had vests, AK-47s, and they were walking into a school with 250 people.
Yeah, and I would argue that the last thing you would want is like a kitten.
You may be able to hold them with a kitten.
This is true. Or you could throw the kitten up into a tree and the fire guys could come.
Right, and then distract them.
Right, with water.
The tree, right, the police officer could ask them to put themselves in handcuffs. I see where you're going.
You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. You know what?
What's wrong with that? And then we could buy them lollipops.
Here's a lolly, guys.
And ask them to be nice to us in the future.
I did not mean to attack the festival. I'm very sorry.
We could have a lollipop summit.
A lollipop summit. Aren't we up against a break?
It is. It's 9:30. We're up against a break. When we come back, there's a lot to talk about and so little time.
And we have a big announcement, too.
When we come back, a big announcement from Sackhead Sean.
All that and more here on the Sackheads Radio Show, live on the SHR Media Network.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians.
You got a business. You didn't build that.
A team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying calf for the stupid promo.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Soko as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, 'cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on shrmedia.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Who listens to the Andrea Kaye Show? Let's find out as we eavesdrop on listener Roger Johnson in Encinitas.
You know, if our policy is going to be bring any child who comes across the border who says coordination, we have to take them in.
Okay, so apparently Roger fell asleep in the middle of my brilliant political tirade, and now he plans to sue me because I put him on the air, sleeping. Obviously, he's a liberal.
Snoring, not an option while listening to The Andrea Kaye Show, Tuesday mornings at 11 on Financial News and Talk.
You know I'm right. Y'all know I'm right.
Hello, I'm Matt, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale President Larry Arnn on the continuing relevance of the Constitution.
Many argue today that the Constitution is outdated because it addresses problems peculiar to the 18th century. Some parts of the Constitution do read rather quaintly. Consider the injunction against titles of nobility in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. But is that so outdated? The purpose of the injunction is to prevent the government granting special privileges to some for partisan reasons. This strikes at the heart of the rule of law. The crony capitalism so common today is a place where the government bestows favors and tax dollars on some businesses to give them a leg up over others. This is exactly the kind of thing the Constitution was meant to prohibit. The Constitution is not so outdated after all.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
And we're back at the Sackheads Radio Show. I am Sackhead Clint. Without Sean. Because something happened on the break, and I can't really get into what it is right now. We may get into it a little bit.
He acted up, and later. I told him I was going to shut him off.
Wiped Sean's off-site remote.
He's using one
hardware.
of my computers, and I was like, "Say another word like that to me again," and I'm.
And he didn't believe you.
He didn't,
which was hilarious to me because I see your finger hovering over your keyboard of doom because you are like a magician with all this sorcery.
Do you like how I winked before I did?
You did, yeah. You winked and gave me a little heads-up nod. And then you did it. Well, you mouthed first, "Hey, do we got this?" And I was like, I guess we got this. And then you totally wiped it. Which was hilarious to me. Poor Sean.
Poor Sean.
Poor Sean. I don't know. I think Sean might have just been fired by Soko, and I don't even know how that works.
Well, no, he didn't have a 2/3 majority.
Oh my goodness! So Sean, with his own sorcery, ends up overriding your witchcraft. Soko.
No, I actually just put a button back on.
Let's just put it back on.
So, all right, buddy. You've
Hi,
set
buddy.
time out long enough. Go ahead, you can come back.
I can't believe Soko put you in a virtual cage like that.
Well, because I'm not there. You know what's funny is the hairy little guy really steps up when when you're pretty far away. You know what I'm saying? All of a sudden he's a tough guy because the electronics are between he and I.
I'm pretty good behind the
but what's funny is you can't win. Like he's got you. Like he's like Yoda, and you're like a stormtrooper.
Just a really smart stormtrooper.
Just a really right, not the one that those were not the droids you were looking for.
These were not the droids we were looking for. Unbelievable.
So ISIS is gaining ground.
Oh, I won't do my announcement. Go ahead.
Again. Well, you had your chance for the announcement, but you were silenced.
That's fine. It only affects our whole network.
Yeah, no, seriously, you were silenced. What's the big deal? I mean, you missed your opportunity, so there's always next week or whatever. There's always the Twitter box. Like, do something with that.
Hey,
okay.
He's using big words again. I'm proud of you, man.
You like that?
Yeah.
I'm learning, right?
Dude, you want a cookie? I got one for you.
Don't be dirty.
No, I'm serious. Look.
So, Sean, we have a big announcement here at the SHR Media Network, and Sean is giddy. Like, he has been giggling like a little schoolgirl. No offense to any schoolgirls who are listening. Giggling like a little schoolgirl all for the last 24 to 36 hours wanting to get this out. And I can't steal the thunder because you were just so excited about this. Like Sean will literally we'll be standing there talking about something show related, network related, or whatever, and all of a sudden he'll close his eyes really tight, squint his face, ball his fist clench up, and just start shaking. And he just starts shaking like a little bowl of jelly that's just sitting there shaking about, and he's just giggling. And then he stops and he says, "Oh, what were you saying?"
And I yell, "Show me the money," which is weird.
Right. And then you high five yourself, and I'm like, dude, you really got to stop doing that.
A self high five. What's wrong with that?
Nothing.
The problem is
but it's in public, and you're wearing your Sackhead shirt, and we kind of want a little bit of credibility, which is really hard to come by with this crew.
Speaking of credibility,
you like how that was?
We finally added some to the network. No, I just insulted everyone that's been broadcasting with us for a few years. That's nice.
No, you're pretty much a jerk. And on behalf of the SHR Media Network and Sackheads Radio, I, Sackhead Clint, apologize for any offense that Sean's words may have brought upon you.
You know me, huh? Well, doy. So starting this Monday, the 25th of May, 2015, the Sackheads Radio Network, SHR Media, will be expanding with some amazing shows. We've entered into a partnership with Pundit Press. For the people that don't know, Pundit Press came under a horrific technological attack on Saturday. Unbelievable how much damage was done by what I believe to be a leftist group that took them down. Just the amount of work that went into it. It was definitely a targeted thing. As a result, something that we've been talking about for some time, something that Dan and us have been working on, Dan over at Pundit Press, who's just been amazing through all this, we've been working on it together, is essentially we're going to begin hosting the Pundit Press radio broadcasting here on SHR Media under SHR Media. And I want to talk to you about some of the shows that are going to be coming over.
Amazing.
It
amazing
is amazing
lineup. No, it really is. Great shows.
And you already know, obviously, of Sackheads, Edge of Liberty, Evan Miller Report, Susan Knowles is with us, Southern Sense, Ken, Rod Eccles, all those folks are here. And here's who's coming over as well. Underground Professor, Terry O'Brien, Conservative Syndicate, Don Smith Show, Conservative Commandos, The Josh Bernstein Show, Corn Over You, Brian Craig Show, At Odds with Brian Jeffs and Nathan Nephew, Willie Lawson, live and direct with G-Ski, War by Women, Sovereignty Radio, Red Fox Radio, American Conservative Exploration, New Day Red and Black, and a bunch more to be named later. So Dan and I worked on the schedule. Dan did a ton of work on the schedule. So when I say Dan and I, it's because Dan did it. It's like when I say Clint and I, and Clint did it, or Soko and I, and Soko did it. Again, Dan and I, or me and Dan, let me put it me and Dan, have finally kind of put together the schedule that'll work with the merger and us taking over the broadcast. And I'll probably have that up tomorrow, maybe the weekend, on SHR Media. But if you want to see a complete list of our new lineup, go to shrmedia.com and click a continuing partnership blog. It's really amazing, and we're honored and privileged to have these folks coming over to us. an absolutely honored and privileged to have a great friendship in Pundit Press and a sister network, if you will. It really is just this partnership means the world to us, and it's going to really pay dividends for everybody involved. So we thank everyone for all their hard work and patience through all this, and thank you guys for all that you guys have done.
Who are you talking about?
I was talking about all the shows that were working with us on this.
Well, you said you guys, so I didn't know if you were talking to me and Soko. I was going to like high five Soko and say you're welcome.
I'd say you guys in the studio. No, you guys put the legwork into this, so I got to give you guys credit where it's deserved.
We put votes into it, and that's pretty much about it. You have been working your tail off on this. And I don't know if most people, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but just a little bit of insight about how we operate. We each have our own functions, and Sean does an amazing job with a lot of our social media, because I have no idea how any of that works, and networking with other folks and shows, and really doing the lineup and managing the content and kind of the day-to-day operations of shows. Just an amazing job. Puts a lot of time in on that, and I couldn't be happier. Just very appreciative of that. Soko does all the tech, from the music, the sound, running the equipment in studio and whatnot, making sure we're connected and good to go. Does just an amazing job with that. And then I do all in terms of our show for programming, content, topical research, and making sure that we're prepped and good to go. Cookies and beer.
Cookies,
mostly
which
beer.
is
mostly beer.
That.
And handling the finances and stuff like that. So we really come together as a great team, and I'm privileged to be a part of this team. But Sean, you're really on the front lines out there every day with everything you do, and staying on top of social media and connecting with our friends. Great job. What's that?
Wait, what?
And hey, I didn't say this, but I do a phenomenal job with what I do also. I mean, I just a tremendous, just nail it every week in and week out. So, everybody here is just awesome. And I was quoting some fan mail that I wrote into myself. Yeah.
Well, and that's always, it's always nice to get a little note from yourself.
Right.
I get an email from us every time we're on the air telling us we're on the air, which is awesome.
Just in case you forgot, because sometimes you do nod off.
I space occasionally, and then probably by next week we have two pretty huge announcements regarding our trip to Freedom Fest that I think by next week we can make public, and this is going to be gangbusters, beyond gangbusters. And this just shows you the pull we have. No big deal.
It actually is a really big deal.
Big stuff.
Look, it's not like stop teasing it. Just save something for next week. Okay, it's not a big deal. Just kind of downplay it, right? And I have an announcement myself. Fox News, we're coming for you. Anyways, go ahead.
So we're looking forward to that. But let's get. I already have my business cards made up for that. SHR Media, the guys that took down Fox News.
Fox News, a subsidiary of the SHR Media Network.
It would be great as if apparently insider reports saying that a group called SHR Media, who's huge in Uruguay, has bought the
no, we're big in Japan, literally, with our listenership, right?
We actually do have a good Japanese listenership. That's something I've yet to figure out. What's funny is I was going through statistics this week, and you wouldn't believe where we have good listenership. It's kind of strange. And it doesn't always line up. At first I thought it was military bases, like our military bases overseas. I'm like, all right, that makes sense.
Right.
But some places, no. Like, we have regular listeners in Nepal. Wisconsin. That's where the huge earthquake, 2 earthquakes were recently. Iceland, we're big in Iceland.
Yeah, exactly. See, all the places with ice cream.
You're so
Speaking of ISIS, did you say ISIS?
No, I said ice cream. By the way, do you know how to catch a polar bear?
You drizzle some napalm on them.
No, so here's how you catch a polar bear, Soko. You might not know this, but seriously, this is big with polar bear hunters for their pelts and so forth. They cut a hole in the ice, and everybody knows that polar bears love frozen peas, those little frozen peas. So you line the hole that you cut in the ice with those frozen peas, and then when the bear goes to take a pee, you kick him in the ice hole.
Wow. I don't know how to respond right now.
He can't move. He goes right in.
He goes right in. Yeah, it's just amazing. That was a great 17-minute commercial we just put on.
Moving right along to ISIS.
To ISIS. So ISIS is on the move. They have taken over Ramadi. Here's the thing that's troubling. I mean, you have how much blood, American blood and treasure, has been spilled in Iraq. And you now have ISIS that has taken Ramadi. They're on the move again. And there is no shift in how this president, this administration, plans on dealing with them.
No, there is.
No, we have no serious strategy to defeat them.
Defeat them? Oh, no. We got nothing. Sorry, but they have a strategy to deal with them.
Right.
They just don't.
But not to defeat them. I would even say not even to deal with them. And seriously, we are literally. I think we are worse now than we were before. And I'm not talking about before this president. I'm talking about. I think we are worse off now than we were before the surge under President Bush, and maybe even before we went into that region at all. And you know, the Pentagon just kind of minimized the whole thing, and they said when they were asked, "Hey, you know, is there anything to be done? Is there anything that we're going to change in terms of strategy to deal with ISIS?" And the response was, "Why would there be? It was one battle."
Right.
And that the Pentagon continuously reviews its strategy, and said that a major review was not necessary. And I'm quoting an article here from that's on FoxNews.com. So, are you kidding me? To minimize the loss of Ramadi as, well, it was one battle. And that's a quote.
I mean, we've had a bunch of those one battles that they've lost.
That's a big stinking battle.
Well, in Kirkuk, didn't we lose Kirkuk a couple months ago, and they got it back? But the simple fact of the matter is this administration pulled us out of Iraq before the Iraqi government was able to sustain their own country. And we can argue as to whether or not we should have went in there or not, but we were there. That's the reality. We were there. They pulled us out. They didn't have a government and a military and local officials that were ready to take over.
Right.
ISIS, which we know through everything that came out with the Benghazi files and everything, we knew they knew about ISIS a year before Obama called them a JV squad. We still pulled out. We still knew what their intent was.
Mm-hmm.
We left the Iraqis, the people that we said we were going to take care of. Now, again, it's like Japan, whether you wanted to be there or not.
You're there.
You're there, and we have a commitment. And the most amazing part about it is when we were still there in full force near the end, we were making serious headways. And all the attacks were minimal. There wasn't, there was still loss of life, and it's horrible, but there wasn't a major loss of life. You didn't have ISIS slaughtering Sunnis. I mean, it was crazy.
Hey, look, and I also think the Iraqis in this are going to feel like we have abandoned them, and it's going to increase anti-American sentiment in the region.
Of course.
You know, absolutely. You know, now they're talking about, well, we're looking into arming Sunni tribes, in order to help retake Ramadi. And kind of a throwback to the 2006 defeat of Al Qaeda in Iraq, when the U.S. military supported 30 some odd tribes that band together and took out Al Qaeda.
Well,
okay.
Here's the thing: we're not going to win this with pinprick air attacks and minimal input.
Did you just call President Obama pinprick? Because that's funny if you did.
But reality is, Clint, and you know this, is what's the only way that we're going to defeat ISIS? And nobody wants, nobody on the left wants to even admit this is the reality. But the reality is first of all, this administration allowed ISIS to become what it is, and now our only option is to completely go in and eradicate them with the full might and power of the U.S. military.
So do you know that one play? We're both baseball fans, no secret. There's that one play that kind of swings the tide of the game, right? It's a game changer, and it changes momentum of the game and everything else.
Yep,
and I think that the taking of Ramadi was a game changer potentially. I think that it was a huge moral victory for ISIS, not to mention a strategic victory as well, but huge and a potential momentum shifter. Well, there's a colonel from U.S. Central Command, a spokesman. He's Colonel Patrick Ryder, who says, quote, "We are confident we have the right strategy. Momentum will continue to be on our side." No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so. The momentum has actually stalled with the fall of Ramadi, because I think that was a big one. Now you may be able to swing and get it back, but it's going to come at a cost. Absolutely.
You look at momentum in their morals,
their morale.
Morale. Sorry. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, there's wrong emphasis. So if you emphasize, I know you're Boston, you have some trouble with emphasis, but you just got to emphasize the right part of that word.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting there. It's been a long couple days.
Yeah, I know.
But you look at what happens. A couple days before that, we had Delta Force troops go into Syria and kill their big money guy, and then they turn around and take Ramadi. So you know what that said? All right, you're going to take one of ours? We'll take your city. And they took it. And it's a slap to the face.
Yeah.
And you think now that killing that one financial guy is going to make a difference to ISIS? Absolutely not. They just turned around and took a city. We have to be completely ruthless with ISIS, and they need to feel like every time they lay their head down to close their eyes that it could be the last time, because an American soldier, munitions, whatever is going to come through the door shortly.
You know what would have a huge demoralizing effect potentially? And it doesn't even have to be Clint Eastwood. It doesn't even have to be legitimate. But if the United States government dropped flyers on the various ISIS positions, or just got them all out there somehow, big propaganda campaign, basically saying that all American bullets were dipped in pig's blood.
Yep. They wouldn't even try it.
Right. Because they believe that they would never get their, I don't know how many virgins, and
I think they're up to 26.
They're up to what?
26?
26? 75.
Bingo.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think.
Could you imagine they get this pamphlet and they're like, ooh. Even if it's not true, but just to say that it's true, some of them would not fight.
Oh, but there'd be so many hate-mongering groups. Oh, the Americans, look at how they treat us. They dip their bullets in pig blood. No, that was just to get them to... No, you said it. It has to be true. The UN would be opening investigations. It would just be a whole rigmarole.
Right, because of the human rights violations of the pigs.
Oh, exactly.
Like PETA would be all up in arms. Well, not literally, but,
Ixnay on the E to pay. But yeah, no. Listen, at the end of the day, this president has created this situation in his attempt to get reelected and be the anti-war president, which is I mean, really, the pullout started so he could get oh, no, I said I was going to shut down the war in Iraq and shut down the war in Afghanistan. I did just that. Now re-elect me. Okay, you're re-elected. Oh, there goes Iraq. Oh, yeah, nobody saw that coming. No, we have all this information that says you did see it coming. Well, yeah, but I don't go to those security briefings.
I don't think he cares.
I don't think he cares. I really don't. I agree with you. I said the other day that the last couple months have really swayed my opinion from incompetent to completely incompetent with maybe some underlying goals to borderline nefarious.
You give him more credit than I do, though, because I think it's straight up nefarious.
But the reason, well, and I've told you this before, the reason that stops me from saying fully nefarious is my belief in what the office of the president should be versus what it is. And it's hard for me to just, and I know he's in that office, but it's hard for me to mentally turn around and say that he is nefarious because just the office he holds I have so much respect for that I think I mentally kind of cut back a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's extremely sad. But yeah, I said the other day, you know what? With the tipping point for me completely was when he made the announcement that he made the day after Law Enforcement Week, the day after he gave that half-ass speech. Mm-hmm. And then he turned around and goes to, what was it, Jersey, and makes a speech about pulling the reissuing of military equipment to local officials. After I saw that, I said, nope, I'm done. I'm done. I can't, nothing he says now will I believe has any good intent. He's like Hillary was to me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago.
27 years, a long time ago.
When did Watergate start? Because that's when I stopped trusting Hillary. Clint, I know we're coming up on a break quick. We have to approach ISIS right now to actually eliminate this threat before it gets worse.
At this point, no. I mean, you have homegrown terrorists here who are attempting to join ISIS, who are traveling to join ISIS. You have to completely dismantle and defeat and crush ISIS at this point, I think. And I don't. I know there's a lot of folks that don't agree with military intervention. However, at this point, I really don't see a viable option. And again, that's not to protect them necessarily overseas, but that's to protect us here at the homeland. I mean, as ISIS gains more credibility and more victories, and they're building their morale, their support system here and homegrown terrorism is going to be more attractive for those that want to engage in that, or for those that are prone to that type of influence.
They've become a direct threat to the citizenry.
They have. I mean, you did.
In America, that is radio.